Hello, welcome to the channel Why Stories. Enjoy watching.
Oh, Paulino, what will I do without you now? The director lamented. You are irreplaceable to me. Come on, Liliana, there are no such people, the man chuckled. Besides, it often happens that a new employee is better than the previous one. Maybe, but there are exceptions to the rule, the woman said with frustration in her voice. Of course, I understand everything. They offered you more money, and there is room for career growth. I've been planning to open another department for years now, but there's always something, either no time, no money, or no reliable supplier. For many years, Liliana Vasquez had been heading her small sausage production plant. Business was going well, the enterprise brought in a stable income that gradually grew each year. However, the director couldn't make a significant leap all these years. And the woman herself didn't know if she needed to expand her business on a larger scale. Liliana preferred to stop at this point. As they say, she had enough for a good life, and work consumed all her time. After graduating from the Food Research Institute, the young Liliana returned to her hometown and found her way. At first, she worked at a meat processing plant, then began to think about trying something on her own. The girl's parents were shocked. They were ordinary people, and they had no money. Liliana borrowed money from all her relatives and friends, took out a loan, and launched her first production line. The girl immediately decided to produce quality raw materials. Although such products were more expensive than ordinary ones, Liliana always stood her ground. And she succeeded. Her products quickly started to have a high demand. And then, as they say, it took off. Over time, she assembled a good team. The guys worked well, and the young businesswoman did not mistreat her people. Many wanted to join her, but the owner immediately set strict requirements. Workers were not only not allowed to drink, but even to smoke. At first, many were unhappy, but Liliana stuck to her principles. So, after a year, she had a team of like-minded people. Those who wanted freebies or parties at work were filtered out, and the girl had her own cohesive team. They had been working like this for 5 years, but to her regret, Paulino Herrero, who held the position of her chief manager, left the job. He was planning to go to the capital. There, he was offered very good money and the prospect of eventually taking the place of the deputy. Liliana understood everything, but Paulino was a reliable person. It was very difficult to replace him. Okay, Paulino, at least call me sometimes. She hugged her former employee goodbye. I will miss you a lot. Liliana, I promise, the man smiled. Besides, we'll have things to discuss. I'll tell you how things work in the capital. Liliana returned home without enthusiasm. Finding a good replacement for Paulino so quickly was extremely difficult. There were few such specialists in the city, and those who were needed a lot of time to train. The woman poured herself a strong cup of coffee and sat on the couch. She was trying to figure out what to do next. Working without the chief manager for a long time was impossible for Liliana. She already had a lot on her plate. Liliana was 37. She had been living in her own house for a long time. Not that she was extravagant, but she had a few people working for her. They took care of her house. The woman simply didn't have the time to deal with household matters. But by the time she came home, there was no one around. Usually, she took a stroll in the garden. Her gardener had arranged a small fruit garden and planted large flower beds with perennials. Then the woman entered the house, where dinner was already made for her in the kitchen. Teodora, the housekeeper, had been working for her for many years, and she cooked excellently. Liliana had no personal life. In fact, she was attractive, but apart from a fleeting romance in her youth, when she was still in college, there was nothing else for her. Daughter, you need to think about yourself too, her mother usually told her. Your factory is going to generate income, but youth passes so quickly that you won't even notice. Teresa Vasquez, Liliana's mother, was right. At first, Liliana thought that after 30, she would definitely deal with this issue, but somehow everything at work never seemed to come together. There were always urgent matters. So Liliana didn't have time to look back, and she was already 38. Maybe family life is not for me, she sighed. Who needs me now at this age? The woman didn't show that she often cried at night due to loneliness. Liliana especially wanted to have children. Maybe I'll get pregnant through IVF from someone. Then I don't need to look for anyone. And, in general, I don't even know what it means to have a relationship. I don't have any experience, except for 2 months of dating Valerio and kissing him, and that's it. When Liliana began to think about a child, her chief manager left, and she had to devote all her energy and time to solving this problem again. God, who will I take for his position? Her brain tore apart. Claudia and Marino are very good guys, but they are not traders. It will be difficult for them to deal with clients. I need someone assertive. Liliana made a call at work, as maybe someone had such a person in mind. The main thing is that he has some education, the ability to have a dialogue with clients, and, of course, sales skills. The workers shrugged and promised to ask their acquaintances. One of them was Gabriel Garrido. He worked as a laborer in the workshop. He was a responsible worker, didn't drink, didn't smoke, and Liliana knew him for a long time. They practically launched the first line together. The man loved his job and sincerely wanted to help his boss. So on the weekend, he chatted with a neighbor. At that time, his nephew was visiting. As the neighbor said, Alvaro had recently returned from the capital, where he had a good position, but still decided to return home. His parents lived in a village 20 kilometers from the city. Well, if he has experience in this field, Liliana could invite him for an interview, Gabriel said to his neighbor. Yes, I'll call him now. You talk to him yourself, the man suggested, and he went into his yard. 5 minutes later, a young man of about 35 came out onto the street. The stranger was handsome, and judging by his appearance, he had conquered more than one female heart. Alvaro and Gabriel reached out their hands. I've heard that reliable employees are needed at the factory. Yes, confirmed the neighbor. We need a chief manager at our sausage factory. The conditions are good, the owner is honest, the salary is regular, and no one is treated unfairly. The only thing is, you can't drink or smoke here, that's the strict rule. Well, then, Alvaro scratched his head. I can give it a try. When can I come to you? Liliana is at the factory every day from early in the morning, the neighbor replied. Come on Monday at 9 o'clock. Even though the factory works on weekends, she doesn't always come. All right, the man smiled. See you on Monday at 9 o'clock. The weekend quickly passed, and Liliana reluctantly went to work. To her surprise, a man was waiting for her. They say you're hiring here? He smiled. So, I decided to offer you my services. The woman looked at him attentively. She liked his audacity. Without it, unfortunately, nothing would work out. Well, not exactly hiring, she replied. Let's first have a look at you. Sure, the man began to spin around. He laughed loudly. I'm even willing to undergo a search. Well, if you're so bold, then come in, the director said, opening the door. I think a cup of coffee in the morning will cheer us up and give us the opportunity to talk openly. I'll be honest, I don't like games. Everything at our factory is transparent. If someone is sick, it means they are sick. If they can't come to work today for some reason, it means they don't come. Can it be any other way? The guest wondered. I think in any respectable company, it should be like that, otherwise, everything will just fall apart. Yes, that's right, the woman supported him. Well, until they bring us coffee, tell me a little about yourself. I think you've already been told what's happening here. I'll start by saying that my name is Alvaro. Alvaro Vega, the guest began. I literally returned from the capital the other day. I worked there as the chief manager at a warehouse. Well, as it is everywhere now, I didn't have official employment. How come? Liliana was surprised. You are a financially responsible person. That's how it is, he sighed. Now, even in the capital, they arrange such positions through intermediaries to avoid paying taxes. All right. What kind of goods did the warehouse deal with? Liliana asked with interest. Were there industrial or food products? Personally, at my warehouse, we had canned goods, groceries, and sausage products, he replied. We only dealt with food. What didn't suit you in the capital? The woman persisted. Now, on the contrary, everyone is going there, and the salary is higher than here. To be honest, I didn't want to leave, but my father got sick, Alvaro replied. I couldn't leave him. My mother can't handle it alone. I want them to move to the city, where there are doctors and medical facilities. In our village, there isn't even a paramedic. I see, sighed the director. What education do you have? Do you have a diploma? Of course, Alvaro smiled. I graduated from college as an accountant. Here are my documents, he said, placing his diploma on her desk. Liliana carefully read the diploma, then went through the work history. So, you only have the position of an assistant accountant where you were officially employed, she concluded. For a chief manager, that's a bit insufficient, of course. Well, I worked in the capital for 4 years. If you want, I can give you the phone number of someone you can talk to. The guest tried not to miss such an opportunity. Moreover, I learned very quickly, you won't have to explain things to me 100 times. It was evident that the man used all his charm to attract the attention of the factory director. He complimented her and made jokes, but it seemed that everything was unsuccessful. Liliana looked unyielding. All right, I'll think about it, she finally said. If no one else responds within 2 weeks, I'll call you for another interview. Okay. I'll be looking forward to it, Alvaro said with a gentle voice. I'm sure you won't regret choosing me. Throughout the day, Liliana thought about today's guest. On the one hand, he had the qualities needed for a manager to promote their products and lead the team, a bit of audacity, a willingness to work, a silver tongue, all of which were essential. But there was something inside the woman that was against him, and she couldn't understand the reason for it. What if I don't find anyone else? She pondered. I can't handle this alone for more than a month. I will still need a person, and within a month I can train Alvaro, and he will be able to visit clients himself. Almost 2 weeks had passed. No one had applied for the position of chief manager. There were a few more people, a young man, practically without experience, an older woman, and a man, a former lawyer. These are not suitable at all, Liliana sighed. I guess I'll invite Alvaro again, but there's something about him I don't like. I just don't know what. Should I check him in the database or something? If he didn't officially work in the capital, I wouldn't find him. I can check his criminal record, and then maybe I'll meet with him again. After 2 days, Alvaro's phone rang, and he was invited for another interview. All right, Liliana finally said. Let's give it a try. I think a month will be enough for us to figure everything out. You can start working tomorrow. I'll be waiting for you at 9. Liliana, thank you, the man rejoiced. You'll see, you won't regret hiring me. As Alvaro had said, he turned out to be a quick-witted guy. He grasped everything on the fly. His boss also liked his sense of humor. Maybe we'll make it work, she thought. The guy is not stupid. Okay, let's start, and time will tell. For the first 2 months, Alvaro came to work earlier and stayed there later than everyone else. Now he was sitting and dealing with some papers. Are you already here? The director exclaimed, looking at the clock. It's not even 9:30 yet. I wanted to review some old invoices, the man in the store Bird and Cafe Sweet Pie responded wearily. I have a meeting, so I need to be well prepared for it. I see, Liliana smiled. If you have any questions, don't hesitate, you can always ask me, just come straight to my office. She opened the door and entered her office, placed her bag, and started her computer. They had a significant order. A company wanted to contract for sausage and sausage products for state schools. Liliana couldn't involve the new chief manager yet because he didn't know anything about it, so she had to go there herself to coordinate all the conditions. But on the day of signing the contract, she still needed to take Alvaro with her. Alvaro, we will go to sign the contract next week, the boss said. I will inform you of the exact day later, so don't plan anything for that day. All right, Liliana, I understand, the chief manager smiled. Just let me know what I need to prepare for the meeting, he said. 5 days later, the director and the chief manager were driving on the highway. It was the end of August, and the heat had already subsided, so the trip was comfortable. You should come here in the spring, Alvaro said, looking out the window. How beautifully the meadows bloom here. I haven't seen a more beautiful place. You know, many of my acquaintances deliberately come here with their families, or couples come here for a romantic getaway. Yes, that's probably the only thing the neighboring town is famous for, its spring meadows and horseback rides, Liliana chimed in. And do you not come here with your family? Alvaro asked with interest. Or do your children prefer amusement parks? No, we don't come here, she replied shortly and added, for one simple reason, I currently have neither the family nor the children. You know, I'm also in favor of not starting a family before the age of 35, the man said seriously. I feel like I'm not ready to have children. I'm just starting to feel that I'm ready for serious relationships now. So, you also don't have a family? The director exclaimed. Looking at you, I would have never thought so, she laughed. Usually, men like you are very popular with women. Is appearance really that important? Alvaro replied. It's important to find your woman. Let a million beautiful women run after you, they mean nothing. I want to meet my one and only, and I cherish myself for her. I thought that such men no longer exist, Liliana smiled. I thought that chivalry died a long time ago. And now I see that some specimens are still left. It's very heartening. Nowadays, everything is so quickly resolved that without love, feelings have taken a back seat. Well, how can one live like that? Could you marry someone you don't love? Alvaro looked at the woman. I, for example, wouldn't do it for anything. How can such a thing even happen? I don't know, the woman laughed. After all, many people have been living like that for decades. Well, let them live like that, but I won't, the man replied coldly, falling silent. Liliana looked at him attentively. Despite all his merits, Alvaro remained incomprehensible to her. She had known him for more than 2 months, but he still remained a mystery to her. He's too perfect, she thought. That's not how life works. Or maybe I've just been unlucky, and I've never met anyone like him. After half an hour, they entered the neighboring town. Liliana was about to meet with the Minister of Education. Together, they discussed the contract terms again. Alvaro tried to take the most active position. He easily charmed the minister, and on parting, the minister even hugged him in a friendly manner. Wow, how did you win him over so easily? The director exclaimed when they were returning. He almost kissed you when saying goodbye. Well, there's no fraud in that, Alvaro laughed. You can see that the minister is a good guy. A couple of compliments and a few jokes in the right places, and he blossomed. I genuinely talked to him. I really liked him. And when a person is pleasant, you can do anything for them. Liliana returned home satisfied. This contract was not only for a substantial amount for her mini-factory, but also implied long-term cooperation. Alvaro, thank you very much for your work, the director shook Alvaro's hand. I'm very glad to have you on my team, she smiled. Oh, come on, it's my job, he laughed. I hope you'll trust me more now, he winked at his boss. The new chief manager did indeed work well. Everything went smoothly for him, he spoke easily with people, and everyone was amazed by his charm. Perhaps I don't understand people as well as I thought, Liliana thought to herself, looking at Alvaro. He works very well. I'll have to think about a bonus. The new year is coming soon, I'll give a gift to all my guys. Liliana, let's organize a New Year's party for everyone, the chief manager suggested in mid-December. The guys have worked so well this year, and they should get a reward for it. I don't welcome drinking parties at my factory, the director said sternly. What does that have to do with it? Alvaro was surprised. We'll order food and juice and organize some contests and dances. You know how great it will be. It doesn't take much money to do this. I don't even know, she replied more calmly. I usually give people the 13th salary for the new year, and they celebrate at home on their own. Of course, it's up to you, the man replied, but after such a party, people will love you even more. Well, all right, you convinced me, she smiled. Then let's think about how to organize all this. Let me take care of this, he said to his boss. I have a little experience with this. I can assure you that everything will go well. The party was scheduled for the evening of December 27th. For the employees, it was the first time they would have such a party, so they were eagerly anticipating the celebration. They say there will be hosts, contests, and dances, the factory workers whispered to each other. On the day of the celebration, it was decided that everyone would finish work by 5:30. By the start of the celebration, everyone should have changed into festive attire and been seated at the table. Dear friends, the director raised a glass of juice. I want to thank you for your work and for staying with us for many years. May the new year bring you not only health and prosperity but also happiness for your families. On behalf of our factory, let me give you the gifts. There's a bonus in the envelope and a festive set, including champagne, for your New Year's table. The holiday went very cheerfully, with the hosts constantly pulling someone from behind the table to participate in a contest. Some lost, some won, but everyone found it very amusing. Now we have a dance contest, the host announced into the microphone. Come on, don't be shy. Liliana, may I invite you? Alvaro extended his hand to his boss. Why not? She laughed and, getting up from the table, went to the dance floor with her partner. When the music stopped, people should have frozen in any awkward pose the dancers found themselves in. The first one to move, regardless of the pose, would be eliminated from the contest with their partner. Out of 8 pairs, only 2 remained. Alvaro was doing his best to support his partner. Liliana, you're just shifting your body weight onto me, he whispered. Then you definitely won't be able to move. The music stopped, the dancer from the competing pair froze on one leg, and Liliana immediately leaned on her partner. 1, 2, 3, everyone counted in unison, and on the 5th count, the woman couldn't hold her pose any longer and lowered her leg. Hooray, we won, Alvaro looked into the director's eyes. See, everything worked out for us. Liliana was embarrassed and blushed. She quickly sat back in her place and tried not to talk much with her manager for the rest of the evening. Thank you so much for such a celebration, she said, hearing Alvaro's voice as she headed to her office. Are you leaving already? Sorry, but I need to go home, she nervously rummaged through her bag with her hands. Thank you, you organized everything wonderfully. Liliana, don't worry, I'll take care of everything, Alvaro approached the woman. You danced brilliantly, he almost whispered. She startled, thanked her manager again, said goodbye, and rushed out of the office. I certainly don't need this, she scolded herself. I can't have a romantic relationship with my chief manager. Keep yourself together, Liliana. She sat in her car and stepped on the gas. Her entire body seemed to tremble with electricity. It was difficult for her to breathe. Liliana unbuttoned her coat. Oh God, what's wrong with me? She scolded herself. I behave like an 18-year-old girl. I can't even remember the last time I danced. And the worst part is, I felt good with him. Throughout the night, she couldn't calm down, constantly feeling Alvaro's body, who embraced her during the dance. Finally, Liliana couldn't take it anymore and took a sleeping pill. She fell asleep in the early morning. She saw herself walking on a road. Suddenly, the sky darkened, and a black cloud hung over her head. Come here, it whispered to Liliana. Don't be afraid. Didn't you feel good with me? The woman raised her head and looked at the sky. The black cloud turned into Alvaro's face. He reached out to embrace her, his fingers already touching her, and she felt her body turning cold and freezing. Alvaro's hands wrapped around her entire body, and she screamed. Liliana woke up to her own screaming. She quickly got out of bed, taking a while to come to her senses. It was dark outside. Liliana went to the kitchen, glancing at the clock. It was 6:30. My God, what kind of dream was that? She trembled. I need to stay away from this person, she warned herself, but there's something pulling me towards him. That day, Liliana tried to avoid her manager. He was out visiting 2 clients, so the woman relaxed a bit. By lunchtime, she was engrossed in her paperwork, forgetting everything. Liliana, she heard someone's voice. Hello. How are you? She startled. Alvaro was standing in front of her, smiling broadly. It was clear that he was in a good mood. Beto Gil wants to increase deliveries by 100 kilograms, he joyfully announced. I've been talking to him about it for a long time, so I finally managed to persuade him. You did well, the boss dryly replied. Thank you very much for your work, you get along well with people. Do you feel unwell today? Alvaro asked the woman with concern. You look very pale. No, everything's fine. I just had a headache last night, she replied quietly. I haven't danced in 100 years, the director smiled. So, we need to dance more often, Alvaro laughed. Let me invite you to a restaurant. I know a good place, and the highlight is that everyone dances there. Alvaro, I'm so sorry, but it probably doesn't suit me well, Liliana politely declined. All right, then let's go to the park, he suggested. Now there are holiday performances everywhere. Okay. Maybe later, she calmly replied. Thank you for the invitation. If you have any more questions for me, could we discuss them now? I have a lot of work today. No, the man replied shortly. I'll come by later. Honestly, I have a lot of work too, Alvaro smiled. Liliana was trying to avoid her main manager. He wasn't exactly pursuing her, but something strange was happening to her. When she didn't see him, she had a persistent feeling that she missed him. For a few days, Liliana fought against it, but then she gave in and agreed to go for a walk with Alvaro in the park. What's happening to me? She tried to understand herself, holding her head. I simultaneously feel that this person is dear to me, but at the same time, there's some danger emanating from him. Maybe this whole dream is nonsense. Clearly, he likes me, she reasoned. What if he's the man I've been waiting for all my life? I'll miss such an opportunity, and I won't have another chance. Alvaro was chatting happily with his boss after the performance. The woman was trying to suppress her fear and enjoy the walk. Liliana, I insist that you allow me to invite you to a cafe, the man laughed. Please, don't refuse me. You know, Alvaro, she looked at him, it's very hard to resist your charm. You say it so sincerely that I just can't refuse you. They headed towards a cafe, but unfortunately, there weren't any free tables. Then Alvaro insisted they go to his favorite restaurant. It's very cozy here, you'll see, he helped Liliana take off her coat. There's no fuss here, and the atmosphere is very friendly. They cook so well that everything is finger-licking good. They sat at a table, and beautiful, relaxing music was playing. After a few minutes, their order arrived. Alvaro opened the wine and poured it into glasses. Well, here's to fruitful cooperation, he raised his toast. To many useful fruits. Liliana, I'm very happy that we met. I've never met such a confident and successful leader or such an amazingly insightful woman. Thank you, Alvaro, for your toast, she said, raising her glass. I'm also very glad we got acquainted. To us. She smiled. They had been talking throughout the evening. Alvaro told many stories from his life and expressed opinions on various things. His views seemed rational and noble. Liliana was silently watching him. It was as if she was falling more and more into him. Do you think it would be better for us to expand our production? She asked with interest when Alvaro brought up the topic of possible renovations at their plant. It's so interesting to talk to you, said Alvaro as they left the cafe. Liliana, thank you for such an amazing evening. These moments with me will last forever. I also enjoyed spending time with you, the woman admitted. Thank you for your stories, I could listen to you endlessly. Liliana, Alvaro said hesitantly. Tomorrow is the 31st of December, and I would like to give you a New Year's gift. I deliberately didn't present it to you today. To be honest, I would like to see you again. The woman was indecisive. She didn't know what to say to him. She had a persistent feeling that she herself would like to meet him again, but again, some quiet voice from the depths of her soul warned her about it. Okay, she finally replied. Let's meet tomorrow around 4 somewhere. Tomorrow is our day off, after all. Let's go to the ice rink, Alvaro suggested. You know how fun it will be there. But I don't know how to skate, she objected. My legs will spread in different directions. I'll fall. Don't worry, I'll catch you, Alvaro laughed. You'll get so much pleasure, I can't even describe it to you. Well, no one can get bored with you anyway, the woman agreed. Then we'll meet at 4 near the rink. Liliana returned home, but after an hour, she jumped back into her car. What should I give him, she thought, leaving one store and entering another. It has to be something traditional, so it doesn't seem too personal, or he'll think I'm too clingy. Maybe a watch? Yes, it's a masculine gift, but you should give it when the man is already yours. The woman spent several hours at the shopping center. She was very tired. The thought of what she could give Alvaro kept spinning in her head. Finally, Liliana gave up and went into a men's clothing store. Let it look dull and uninteresting, but I have no more powers, she thought, choosing a leather belt. She liked an expensive one, and she decided to buy it. The belt was beautifully packaged in the store. It's very classic, if not to say quite expensive, she said to herself, returning home. The next day, Liliana was very nervous, especially early in the morning. Alvaro attracted her, and she realized that she couldn't resist it. Honestly, being with him, she felt good. She faced a difficult task. She needed to dress attractively but in clothes suitable for skating. Dresses and fur coats, of course, were not suitable for this. I look pretty good in them. The woman flaunted in jeans in front of the mirror. I think I even look younger this way. If it weren't for the official style at work, which I came up with myself, I wouldn't get out of these jeans. Liliana wore a simple but stylish sweater, tied a cashmere scarf, and neatly tucked her hair under the cap. She really looked wonderful. Well, are you ready for an adventure? She laughed. The main thing is that they don't all happen at once, where I already feel like things are moving towards a romantic relationship. And the worst thing is that I can't prevent it. Alvaro Vega was also dressed in jeans and a sports jacket with a striped scarf around his neck. Oh my God, we're like 18 years old, Liliana laughed. I would never have thought that I would do such a feat. The most interesting part is still ahead. The manager grabbed her hand and instantly pulled her along. Like this, first one foot, then the other, there's nothing difficult about it. Like this, good. Now try it yourself, and I'll catch you. Liliana cautiously glided on skates, trying not to fall. She had a couple of meters left when one of her legs gave way, and she fell into Alvaro's embrace. It's okay, he caught her and helped her regain her balance. You're doing fine, he laughed without letting go of her. You probably skated in childhood. You're deliberately exaggerating to cheer me up, she smiled. There are plenty of clumsy people like me on the ice. They skated for about an hour more. Finally, Alvaro and Liliana changed their skates and went to the nearest cafe. The impressions are truly unforgettable, the woman rejoiced. It's like I've returned to my childhood. Thank you, Alvaro. I really enjoyed it. I'm glad, he said, smiling broadly. Liliana, let me give you a small gift. I don't know if you'll like it or not, but for some reason, I think it suits you. The man handed Liliana a small box. She opened it and was shocked by the gift, so much so that she couldn't speak at first. Alvaro, this is beautiful, she took out a pendant on a gold chain. What an amazing stone. It's rose quartz, he smiled. It changes colors depending on the lighting. I'm very pleased that you liked it. I chose it for a very long time. Yes, you really managed to pick a very beautiful gift, she said, looking at him. Thank you so much, I'm thrilled. I'm sorry, but my gift won't be original. I don't have such a gut feeling as you do. Liliana handed the manager a rectangular box. He took it and opened it. Wow, he exclaimed. And you say it's just a simple gift? This is top quality leather. What a belt! Alvaro rejoiced. Liliana, you've pleased me. I really love excellent accessories. This belt is just stunning. The couple spent some more time in the cafe. It was already around 7 when Liliana offered to drive her manager home. Well, everything should be the other way around, but unfortunately, I don't have my own car yet, he sighed when the car stopped near his house. Liliana, thank you for everything, for the skates and for such an expensive gift. The man looked at her intently. Liliana saw that he was leaning towards her. She instinctively felt that Alvaro wanted to kiss her and quickly stepped aside. Her heart was pounding furiously. Alvaro didn't insist, wished her a happy new year, and got out of the car. Oh my God, what's going on? Liliana started her car in shock. I fell in love with him. The woman returned home, her body was trembling. She fell on the bed and burst into loud sobs. Conflicting feelings still tore her apart. Liliana had been spending New Year's alone for the past several years. On the 1st of January, she usually went to her parents. The woman set the table, poured herself some wine, and was about to congratulate herself on the new year when her phone rang. It was Alvaro. Oh God, what do I do? She asked herself. If I answer the phone now, I won't be able to hold myself back. The phone stopped ringing. Liliana drank her wine and poured herself another glass, then took her phone and dialed Alvaro's number. Liliana, can we at least have a virtual toast? He asked naively, childishly. I'm sitting at home alone with my cat. He categorically refuses to drink. Liliana laughed heartily into the phone. In her head, an image of a cat waving its paw that wouldn't drink wine flashed. Well, okay, let's do it, she said through laughter. Since your cat is against it, then the two of us will drink. Maybe we should combine our efforts? If your cat lets you go, maybe we could meet at my place. With pleasure, Alvaro was delighted. No, the cat won't mind, he's already had his holiday feast. I set up such a New Year's table for him that street cats can only dream of. Oh my God, what am I doing? Flashed through the woman's mind. But the wine quickly silenced that voice, and Liliana rushed to her wardrobe to change before the guest arrived. She put on a revealing dress, and the pendant Alvaro gave her adorned her neck. She spent about 20 minutes on makeup and hairstyling. That's better, she smiled. Now, before his arrival, she needed to quickly set the table. Liliana glanced at the clock. It was midnight. Alvaro said he would call a taxi, so she was anxious. There will be traffic jams everywhere today, she worried. I hope he won't be late because, as they say, a good year's beginning makes a good ending. I don't want to spend the entire next year waiting. But Alvaro wasn't late. He arrived, you could say, just in time. Liliana grabbed his hand, and they quickly ran into the dining room. Alvaro, faster! She shouted. We have exactly 5 minutes left. Come on, open the champagne. The chime struck exactly 12, and Liliana and Alvaro clinked glasses, toasting to the new year. Happy New Year, Liliana, he said, looking into her eyes. You look so beautiful. He pulled her towards him and began kissing her passionately. Liliana couldn't resist him. Good morning, my love, she heard the next morning when she woke up. Liliana, you are my dream, Alvaro showered her with compliments. We were destined to meet. Alvaro, she kissed the man. I never thought I would find you. I'm so happy with you, my love. God, Who would have thought that your cat would bring us together? She burst into laughter. Yeah, we should buy him something for that, Alvaro laughed. He already has his chest covered in medals and orders. I spoil him for good behavior. He loves all these trinkets. Now we need to give him a hero's title. Alvaro stayed with Liliana until the end of the day. They talked about everything all the time. The lovers not only discussed their work but also where to go on vacation. Since the 5th, everyone had to return to work, so they had a few days to spend together. Liliana, let's go somewhere for a short trip, he suggested. What do you think about going to the neighboring city? It will be beautiful there, too. Just for a day, to take a walk. What a romantic you are, she laughed and kissed Alvaro. God, I've been waiting for you for so long. I hope you won't run away from me. Don't even think about it, he said, hugging her. I've settled in your heart for a long time, I would even say forever. That is, until death do us part, she laughed. I really hope it won't happen soon. No way, he protested, we're just starting to live. So, up there, they'll have to wait. Liliana felt like everything she could dream of had come true. Liliana Vasquez had been married to Alvaro Vega for almost 2 years. It had been just a couple of months since their romance began when Alvaro proposed to her. She agreed immediately. Now Alvaro was her boss and practically handled all the issues. Liliana, I'm going to the neighboring city, he told his wife. We need to renew the contract with them. I want to discuss new terms. We can't supply products to them at the old prices anymore. I think maybe we should leave the old terms for now, Liliana looked at him. It's a major, reliable client, and terminating the contract with them is not advantageous. And if they stick to their principles, they might just reject the new conditions. That's why I want to talk to them myself, he said, looking sternly at Liliana. I'll take care of everything, trust me. And Liliana agreed to everything. Lately, she has been overwhelmed with helplessness and tired of everything. Thoughts of giving up her business and handing it over to her husband crossed her mind more often. Alvaro always succeeded in everything, so she didn't doubt him. In reality, Alvaro surrounded Liliana with so much care that she was tired of all this thoughtfulness and composure. She increasingly wished to stay at home and greet him from work. It had been a while, but the feeling of anxiety still hadn't left her. She always felt like something bad was going to happen. Alvaro, she said to her husband one day, I might gradually step back from work. I'm tired of all this, especially since you handle everything better than I do. Do you want to quit your job? He became wary. Then who will lead the company? Well, not completely quit, she replied. I'll just check and sign documents, and you will visit all our clients and make contracts. I want to hire 2 more managers. Well, if you want to take a break from everything, he kissed his wife, I could lead our business, he suggested. I'm not ready for such a radical step yet, she laughed. I probably won't be able to quit my job completely. It might happen when I'm around 60. I would like to transfer part of my workload to you and delegate your responsibilities to the managers. Well, it can be done, he replied discontentedly. Although Liliana initially wanted to go through with this plan, something stopped her at the last moment. Oh God, how can you live with someone and not trust them? She scolded herself. Alvaro has done so much for me already. When will I be able to eradicate this from myself? After that conversation, Alvaro somehow changed. Not that he completely stopped paying attention to Liliana, but he cooled down a bit. Alvaro, something happened to you? She asked him one day. You've been avoiding me lately. Liliana, come on, it's nothing, he hugged his wife. There's just so much work right now. It's unclear when we'll find new managers. Okay, then I'll go to the office every day again, she suggested, so you won't suffer because of my depression. Liliana, everything is fine, he kissed his wife. It's really enough that you work 2 days a week. You know, if I urgently need to sign something, I'll find you. So don't worry. The business with the contract in the neighboring city dragged on. Alvaro started going there too often. Liliana talked to him about it. Liliana, we're almost there, and they will agree to all our conditions, her husband replied. We just need to wait a bit. By the way, could you sign these documents later? It's a contract on new terms, let me keep it just in case. He placed the documents on the table and pulled Liliana towards him, passionately kissing her and not letting her escape from his embrace. Liliana, I'll need to leave for about an hour to check on the smokehouse, he said suddenly. One of the cabinets had been breaking all day yesterday. The man's phone rang. He quickly got up and went to the corridor, then Alvaro rushed in and began to dress quickly. Liliana, I urgently need to go, he said excitedly. They agreed, and I need to be there by 5. Damn, it's already the beginning of the first. Liliana, please sign the contract, or I won't make it to them today. He strictly told me to come to him today. The woman quickly got up from the bed, took the documents, and began searching for a pen. Liliana, it's a standard contract, her husband rushed her. Come on, or I won't make it. She wanted to start reading the documents but gave up and signed 2 copies of the contract. Alvaro, here you go, she kissed her husband. Good luck. I hope everything works out for you. And remember, I love you. The man rushed out of the house at full speed. He got into the car and checked if everything was signed. Liliana did everything as he said. Liliana, you chose this yourself, he whispered, driving his car out of the yard. You could have just transferred the company to me, otherwise, none of this would have happened, so I'm not to blame for this. Alvaro was driving as fast as he could to get there. The minister and the investigator were already waiting for him. It took him almost 2 months to gradually involve the minister in this matter. Well, what? The investigator asked when Alvaro entered the police station. Did you manage to find the contract? Yes, the man replied joyfully. Here it is, as expected, in 2 copies. Bacho took the documents and began to read them. He kept stopping and muttering something to himself. I could have accused her of genocide too, he cursed. Is this how you can treat people? It's a good thing none of the kids got hurt. God, this is nothing but the extermination of a people. What if she was already supplying us with such sausages? Bacho, I think Liliana was planning to do this for the first time, Alvaro reassured him. I was aware of all her affairs over the past 2 years. Now I understand why she didn't want to transfer the company to me. You know, when she proposed all this to me, I immediately refused, but, you see, Liliana still signed a contract for this rotten meat. There's also a document saying that it will be used for sausage and hot dog production. She mentioned this for the first time about a year ago when she transferred the company to me. Liliana asked me to leave her as the director. Naturally, unsuspectingly, I agreed. But when I refused to buy all this spoiled mince, she started blackmailing me. Liliana threatened to file a police report against me, claiming that I somehow forced her to transfer everything to me. So, I needed to find this contract first to have direct evidence against her. So, it turns out she signed a contract to sell low-quality meat for dog and cat food, and she started producing sausages for children from these waste products, the investigators summed up. She should be in jail, the minister said. Only this will work out, no leniency for her. I'll use all my connections, but only to make sure she goes behind bars. After the conversation, Alvaro Vega and Bacho Bravo signed their statements for the investigator. The satisfied man returned home. He had deliberately prepared the minister so that he wouldn't stop at anything, and it worked. Alejandro, Alvaro dialed someone's number on the way. Well, I think we can meet next week and discuss all the details. Yes, I'm selling the company, so I'll need to evaluate your offer, how well it aligns with the price I'll set for it. Alvaro came home very late that day. Liliana had not waited for him, she was already asleep. The next day, she woke up early, didn't wake her husband, went to the kitchen, and made herself coffee. What's wrong with me? She wondered. It's as if I can't breathe. I have such strong anxiety inside that I need to take a valerian pill. After the medication, it got a little easier. She wanted to get dressed and go to work when a police car approached their house. Liliana looked at it in horror. At first, she tried to convince herself that they simply had the wrong house. Liliana Vasquez? A police officer asked her. We have a warrant for your arrest. What's going on? She said in shock. On what grounds do you want to arrest me? You are accused of deliberately using substandard and possibly hazardous raw materials for the production of sausages for schools, he calmly replied. Take all the necessary documents and belongings and come with us, please. What substandard raw materials? She couldn't understand. Everything is official, according to contracts. We'll sort it out at the police station, said the man in uniform. In fear, Liliana rushed into the house and woke up Alvaro. Her hands were shaking, and she couldn't explain anything at first. Alvaro, the police are there. She tried to tell him. They want to arrest me. The man quickly jumped up and started getting dressed. He waited for his wife to gather her things and walked out with her. Liliana, don't worry, I'll handle all of this, he said, embracing her. I'll be back to you soon. The woman spent more than a day at the station. She had already been interrogated, and she still couldn't understand what the case was. All the words spoken to her seemed untrue. You can check out all our contracts. I don't even know what kind of company this is, she denied everything. Okay, then, what do you say to this? The policeman showed her some documents. Is this your signature? It's mine, she confirmed and began reading. What nonsense is this? Someone deliberately slipped it to me. Thanks to your husband, we found out about all this, the investigator replied. My husband gave this to you? She asked in amazement. But that can't be. It can. Here's his statement. The policeman showed her the document. Here he detailed everything, that you transferred the company to him, and then you blackmailed him if he didn't agree to buy the rotten meat for sausages. It's all lies, she cried. This never happened. I never transferred my company to him. Liliana tried to call Alvaro, but his number was blocked. Finally, after 3 days, her parents came to her. The woman was in tears. Mom, I don't understand how he could do all this, she said through tears. I was so stupid. He deceived me and several times hastily slipped some documents to me. The last time was before he went to the neighboring city. I remember clearly how he rushed me to sign, but when he handed me the documents to transfer my company to him, I don't even know, she cried again. Liliana, dear, her father said with a trembling voice, we've already been to a lawyer. The problem is that the minister took a principled stance. He'll do everything to put you in jail. The lawyer said we need a lot of money, then he'll try to reduce the sentence to less than a year. Unfortunately, we won't be able to pay any ransom. Okay, please ask Roberto to come to me, Liliana said. I'll pay him for the work. I don't even know what my situation is with property and money right now. Nothing much, her mother cried. Liliana, you only have your house and car left. He even withdrew all the money from your accounts. Oh God, how did I get involved with him? The woman lamented. Even back then, I had a dream, and I felt that there was something wrong with this person. Liliana's lawyer did everything he could, but Bacho remained inflexible. He involved as many people as he could in this matter. A month later, the trial took place. At the trial, Liliana saw her husband for the first time since the police took her. After being released on bail, he never showed up at home. Alvaro Vega, remember that you must speak only the truth. So, how did you find out that Liliana Vasquez was planning to contract with the company Golden Deer, which supplied waste for the production of animal feed? The judge asked. Probably about 3 months before that, my wife offered it to me herself, the man began. Of course, I refused. You see, 6 months ago, Liliana, being my wife, personally signed documents transferring her company to me. Lately, my wife hasn't been feeling very well. She has had constant depression. I didn't want this, but she insisted, citing that she didn't have as much strength as before. So when I refused to cooperate with Golden Deer, she began threatening me, saying she would report me to the police. Regarding what? The judge asked. Did you commit physical violence against her? No, the respondent objected. She said she would claim that I forced her to transfer the company to me. But, despite her blackmail, I didn't agree to this contract. I went to the neighboring city and warned our client about it. He demanded proof from me, and I found the contract at my wife's and brought it to him. Why did your wife remain the director of the company and still have signing authority? The judicial officer asked. Well, in essence, I never considered this company as my own, the man replied. I didn't care, I never claimed anything there. I wanted my wife to be happy. Her work sometimes brought her great pleasure. Besides, she had much more experience in this field than I did. Liliana couldn't believe her ears. The nonsense her husband was saying simply amazed her. At first, she resisted and tried to deny everything, but very soon, she realized that all of this was futile. The Minister of Education also spoke in court. His speech was not only passionate but also called on the court to take specific actions. Isn't this a manifestation of Nazism? He shouted throughout the hall. Maybe she was planning the extermination of children altogether. The court went into deliberation. Liliana's lawyer caught the judge and spoke with her emotionally. Finally, everyone returned. Considering all the circumstances and taking into account that, thank God, no one was harmed, Liliana Vasquez is found guilty and will be sentenced to 1 year of imprisonment in a general regime colony. Tears flowed continuously down the cheeks of the defendant. Her parents cried on the bench. The lawyer understood perfectly well that the case was completely fabricated, and if it weren't for the minister, he could easily have proven that his client was innocent. But Alvaro found threads that Bacho pulled, and he didn't budge an inch. He continued yelling something in court, saying that all this was unfair and that she should be given 3 years for attempting to take the lives of children. He was finally escorted out of the hall. All right, Alvaro, let it be, Liliana told herself back then. Life is a boomerang, and sooner or later, it will come back to you. It's good that you're out of my life, even if it's this way. After the trial, Liliana suffered greatly, not only from the betrayal of her beloved, but also from the fact that her innocence couldn't be proven. She was shocked by the circumstance that any person with some connection to the government could easily control the fate of others, no matter who it was. They could easily put you in jail at their whim. Liliana desperately tried to understand what had really happened to her. She felt that the key to unraveling this was who Alvaro really was. One thing was clear, she knew nothing about this man. Liliana didn't know that Alvaro had never worked at the warehouse in the capital. He never dealt with such matters before her factory. He decided to finish college as an accountant for one simple reason: he thought he could manipulate things behind his boss's back and remain unnoticed. To give him credit, he was smart, and studying came easily to him. After graduating from college, he got a part-time job as an apprentice accountant. He worked for almost a year at a small firm when disappointment struck him. It turned out to be very difficult to handle money behind the boss's back. Simple manipulations wouldn't work here, and to do something serious, he needed to be the chief accountant so that no one would watch him. How many years do I need to work to get the position of chief accountant? Alvaro pondered at his first job. Probably 5 to 10 years, no less. Well, why should I sit in one place for so long? He thought at that time. I better come up with something else. And he did. When he was 27, he went to the capital. At first, he wanted to get into some small company as an accountant, pump some money for himself in 2 or 3 years, and then disappear from there. So he joined a small firm that organized holidays. Here, Alvaro worked, so to speak, on 2 shifts. The guy was both an accountant and an actor. Here, he also met Marta. At first, a passionate romance united them, followed by the desire to do something together. The first time they managed to steal not so much money, it was only about 100,000, but for scammers, it was a real victory. It turned out that after the holiday, the money for the work was never found. Alvaro and Marta cunningly planned everything. During the search, no one suspected them, so the director sighed with annoyance in her voice, but leaned towards the fact that she herself lost that money. Time passed, and the couple decided to go into more serious business. By that time, Alvaro's father had already fallen ill, and he was going to quit his job. Before his departure, all the money disappeared from their working accounts. There was about $1 million there. And again, the scammers were not found. Alvaro returned with the money while waiting at his uncle's. He was planning to buy some property for him and Marta to invest the stolen money in, but fate decided otherwise. Alvaro, as they say, got lucky, and he was hired as the chief manager. He agreed with Marta to come to him after some time. They pooled all the money they had and bought an apartment there. According to their plan, Alvaro was supposed to marry Liliana Vasquez and then officially take over her factory. Their company was not supposed to last more than 3 years, but after 1.5 years of marriage, Marta became pregnant, and they started thinking about how to quickly pull off their plan. Alvaro came up with the idea of using tranquilizers. He started adding them to his wife's coffee in the morning and evening. After about a week, Liliana began to feel weak. She felt scattered and lacking energy. She wanted to sleep, but sometimes she couldn't even get out of bed. "Liliana, I think you have depression," her husband told her one day. So many years of intense work couldn't have passed without a trace. Alvaro and Marta hoped that Liliana, in such a state, would transfer the factory to him, but it didn't happen. So, Alvaro decided to take radical action. One day, he arranged a romantic evening for his wife and then, under the guise of urgency, presented her with documents. Liliana unquestioningly signed them without even looking at the content. Alvaro arranged everything so that his wife was in a state of intoxication. She had drunk a lot of wine that evening, so she didn't remember anything about that incident. Alvaro wanted to get rid of his wife immediately, but Marta stopped him. She was afraid that they might get caught, so she asked him to wait a little. After some time, the story with the neighboring town unfolded, which Alvaro used to his advantage. He prepared documents to conclude a contract with Golden Deer, as the minister wasn't a fool. He needed direct evidence. Alvaro's words didn't convince him much. So, everything worked out for Marta as they had planned. About a month before presenting the evidence to Bacho, Alvaro started to find out how much he could sell Liliana's factory for. A buyer was found immediately. Alejandro Santos, an entrepreneur from the capital, showed serious interest in buying the sausage factory. After Liliana was imprisoned, Alvaro immediately sold her company to him. Here, Alvaro tricked him and didn't warn the new owner that the factory had a damaged reputation. So Alejandro had to put a lot of effort into restoring it. But the new owner of the factory turned out to be a tough person, and from the very beginning, he started squeezing everything out of the people. Within 6 months, Liliana's team fell apart, and almost everyone left the factory. Alvaro and Marta sold the apartment, took the money, and bought a mansion for themselves. Alvaro was sure that after his ex-wife was released, she wouldn't be able to make any claims against him. For Liliana, this was the most challenging period of her life. It seemed to her that this year had turned into a decade. In the first few months, she went insane. Liliana desperately tried to find answers to her questions, but neither the lawyer nor her parents told her anything. "Liliana, my dear," her mother said, "he sold your factory. They say some businessman from the capital bought it. People are very dissatisfied with him. He immediately cut their salaries and increased working hours. Almost everyone left. There are rumors that he buys untested meat, but he has protection, so everyone keeps quiet. People stopped buying his sausages in the town." "Mom, but it was to be expected," sighed the daughter. "How much effort I put into making my factory produce high-quality products. It's so easy to destroy everything in an instant." "So, he left?" The woman speculated. "Of course, it was dangerous for him to stay here. Perhaps he thought I would get out and revive the business. I'll be honest with you, I've let go of all of this, him and my factory. The parents were worried about their daughter. They understood that Liliana was imprisoned for no reason, but most of all, the mother and father feared what would happen to her when she got out of prison. Finding a job for her now would be unlikely. Of course, Liliana would live in their house, there was no doubt about that. However, knowing what people said about their daughter, the parents realized that she would face contempt and insults. "We have 3 months left," Liliana's father said one day. "We need to think about how to help our daughter. There's no point in her staying at home. Teresa, I think we should sell this house and move from here. Let's start working on this right now. Pedro, where will we go? Do you remember how old we are?" His wife became worried. "We don't really have any relatives anywhere. Do you want Liliana to be mistreated here?" The man looked at his wife sternly. "God, they'll push her to the edge, and she might do something to herself. I won't be able to bear that." "People can," Teresa supported him. "Everyone here has a rotten tongue. Let's look for a calm place, maybe with a small garden. I don't want to live in a big city anymore. Maybe closer to the sea?" Pedro suggested. "Let's check out that small coastal town." "You know, I'm not against it," the woman agreed. "Let's take a look. The sea there is not as popular, so there's not much hustle. But will we have enough money to buy a small house there?" "We'll see about that now," her husband replied, taking out his phone. "Well, maybe not in the town itself, but the suburbs will do." So, Liliana's parents abruptly changed their life plans and moved to the suburbs for the sake of their daughter. "I do love our nature, of course," Teresa said, "but the sea is everything. Despite the fact that this sea, you could say, is dying, even in this state, it looks amazing." "Pedro, I'm delighted." The elderly couple was strolling along the seaside and couldn't get enough of its beauty. Liliana's parents were satisfied with their decision. Yes, they spent all their money on the new house. Teresa and Pedro lost their jobs, but it didn't sadden them at all. "Teresa, you know, I'm glad you finally quit your job," her husband embraced her. "If you want to work, you'll find something here. I don't want to work as a janitor anymore. Let's plant a fruit garden on our 6 acres. The climate here is milder. Although in the summer, it gets just as hot, but there are no such strong winds here." Liliana was greatly surprised by her parents' decision, but very soon, she understood that she simply couldn't stay in her hometown. "Well, here we go," Liliana packed her things. "The scariest year of my life is over." She reached for the book, lying on the nightstand. When Liliana was imprisoned, she took it with her. The Little Prince was her favorite book. Since childhood, she has felt like its main character. The woman ran her fingers over the worn cover once again. "At least now I'll be closer to the sea than ever," she smiled. "I hope that if adventures await me in this new place, they will be good." Liliana walked out of the gate and glanced at the prison building once again. It was as if she wanted to separate that shadow, which fell on the high fence, from herself and leave it here forever. "Let the past Liliana stay here forever," she whispered. "I'll never be the same as before." Her parents, who were waiting for her, approached. Tearfully, her mother and father kissed their daughter and embraced her in their strong arms. "Liliana, we're taking you to a place where you'll forget everything," her father winked at her. "Long live the new life!" Pedro exclaimed loudly. Late in the evening, the family boarded the train, and early in the morning, they were already at their destination. From there, on the early bus, Liliana and her parents traveled to the suburbs. "Well, here we are," her father rejoiced as they turned onto a familiar street. It was almost midnight when the family finally entered the house. Liliana was delighted. Of course, the house was small compared to theirs, but the atmosphere seemed very welcoming to her. Liliana walked through the house, then went out into the yard and the garden, where her father had already planted fruit trees in one section. This year, some of them might even bear fruit. Pedro embraced his daughter. "Liliana, you'll see, everything will be fine here for you." The woman hugged him and burst into tears. He gently stroked her head, tears streaming down his cheeks too. "It'll be okay," he comforted her. "Give it a little time, and you'll move on, and your happiness will find you." In the first few months, Liliana constantly disappeared by the sea. She took a bit of food and water, put the little prince into her bag, and wandered along the deserted shore for hours. The sea calmed her, leading the woman to inner peace. "This is how I want it," she told herself, "to have complete silence inside me behind all these external problems." The waves cut through the smooth surface, but they're only on the surface. Once you descend a meter deep, there's tranquility and silence. It was early June, and Liliana decided that she had recovered enough. Now she was ready to start some work. "Mom, Dad, I need to work," she said to her parents. "I understand that I won't be hired that easily, so maybe you'll hear about something. I'll walk around the town and look at the ads for now." Pedro got a job as a gardener for a wealthy man. He worked for him 3 times a week. Salvador Domingo was not a very talkative person, and there were rumors that something went wrong with his business, causing him to lose a lot of money. Pedro also overheard that his cleaner had left. He's been paying salaries with delays lately, but he still settled everything fairly. "Liliana, maybe I should talk to him?" her father cautiously asked. "Of course, for the first month, you might have to work without pay, but he'll definitely pay you later." When Claudia, the previous cleaner, left, he paid her for 3 months right away. "Dad, but if he hires me, I won't mind," the woman rejoiced. "Besides, I'm living with you for now, I don't need to rent an apartment." "Let me talk to him first, and then we'll see," Pedro replied. 2 days later, Liliana's father went to work. He wanted to talk to his employer right away, but he wasn't at home. It was around 5 p.m. when his car entered the yard. Salvador, the gardener, approached him. "Can I talk to you?" "Yes, Pedro, I'm listening." "Has something happened?" The owner calmly said. "I heard you need a new cleaner?" The man replied directly. "Oh," Salvador sighed, "I do, but you know, I can't pay on time right now. If anyone agrees to such conditions, I'll be happy." "Maybe you could consider my daughter then?" Pedro asked. "She's ready to work on your conditions." Only Liliana was released a few months ago. She served a year for a setup. "Time doesn't make it any easier," the owner sighed. "Honestly, I don't even know. You seem to be an honest person." "What was she imprisoned for?" "Her husband framed her, took away her factory, and accused her of intending to supply substandard products to a major client," the gardener replied. "There was a big government contract, and the minister stood on principle." "Yes, that's business for you," the man said with annoyance in his voice. "You think everything's under control, and then, in one moment, bam, and you are left with nothing." "All right, invite her. Tomorrow at 9, I'll talk to her." "I'm even nervous," Liliana said during breakfast. "I haven't worked in so long. And in general, I've always worked for myself my whole life." "Don't worry, daughter," her father reassured her. "It's only to start with something, and then it'll turn into bigger things. Just be honest about everything," her mother advised. "Don't lie or exaggerate. If he doesn't hire you, it means he's not the right fit for you. After all, it might not just be about him." Liliana arrived at the specified address. The house was indeed large. She estimated that Salvador was several times richer than she was, having his own factory. "I wonder what he does," she thought. Judging by the scale of the house, he must have had a large enterprise. Liliana pressed the doorbell, and a woman greeted her. Her father had told her that it would likely be a housekeeper who organized all the work in the house. "Hello," her home's owner greeted her dryly. "My name is Salvador Domingo. Your father, Pedro, recommended you to me. He warned me about everything, so I asked that you tell me everything yourself." "Hello, Salvador. I'm Liliana," she replied professionally. "I have significant work experience, but only in one field. After college, I worked at a meat processing plant and later opened my mini factory producing sausage products. I led it for over 15 years. I've always worked. I had no time for romantic encounters and family life. So, when I was 38, I had the misfortune to fall in love with the wrong person. Over time, he robbed me and set me up. The client stood on principle and used all his connections. I spent a year in prison for allegedly intentionally producing sausage products from substandard, hazardous raw materials and planning to supply them to schools. Yes, the man sighed, no one obeys laws in our country. It's very difficult to run an honest business in such conditions. Okay, I don't mind hiring you. But I'm not in the best financial shape right now, so I won't be able to pay you steadily. I need someone for 3 days a week. Would you like to work on the same days as your father? Salvador, thank you so much. Liliana happily shook his hand. Then I'll start tomorrow with my father. Liliana, her parents hugged her. We're so happy for you. At least it's a job. Salvador, although a reserved person, never mistreats his employees. I've been working there for almost 4 months, and he's never said anything bad to me, her father added. Dad, what does he do? The woman asked with interest. It feels like he's involved in something more significant. As I heard, he has a hotel chain, Pedro replied, both here on the sea and in other seaside cities, but he's originally from here. His father started this business, but lately he's been pressed hard, probably by competitors. They want to take part of his hotels from him. In short, rumors are circulating that they offered to buy his hotels and resorts for next to nothing. He refused, so they framed him with some bogus charges. To settle it, Salvador sold part of his hotels, so now he only has 5 left. He spent a considerable amount of money on all this. I understand, Liliana smiled. He's just as much a victim of circumstances as I am. Then we'll probably get along well. It was challenging for her at first. She had already gotten used to the heavy physical work, but her father supported her in everything, so she didn't lose heart. The owner turned out to be a reserved person, and Liliana liked that too. He didn't bother her with unnecessary questions. She tried to work well to avoid any problems. Liliana has been working for Salvador for 2 months now. He rarely stayed at home, but the moments when the woman saw him, the owner looked darker than a cloud. Rumor had it that his business was in bad shape. It was a warm day in August when a taxi stopped near the gate, and a beautiful girl appeared on the doorstep. She looked down on everyone, didn't even say hello, ordered someone to prepare a bath for her, and set the table. Who is that? Liliana asked her father with curiosity. His sister or wife? Yes, I've only seen her once myself, Pedro replied. As the cook told me, she's his fiancée, but they've been living together unofficially for about 5 years. She lives in the capital or somewhere abroad. In general, she was a real gold digger who hooked a rich man for herself. Last time she was here, she bossed everyone around for a few days and then left. Again, as they say here, Carolina probably came to ask the owner for money. Not intentionally, but on that day, Liliana overheard their conversation. She was cleaning in the adjacent room when Salvador unexpectedly entered the house. Carolina, I've explained the situation to you, the man said. Put yourself in my shoes. But I have no money at all, the girl screamed. What kind of man are you if you can't provide for me? Carolina, don't scatter words, the owner coldly stated. You've lived the way you wanted for 5 years, and all on my account, so don't get cheeky. I'm having significant problems with my business right now. Fine, Carolina calmly replied. When you solve your problems, then we'll talk. She demonstratively grabbed her suitcase and headed for the exit. The man shouted something after her, but then turned around and went into his room. She could have at least asked how she could help you, he shouted loudly and threw something on the floor. How tired I am of all this. Well, go to hell. Liliana was in shock. Alvaro at least played love with her, but here it was blatant exploitation. Women like her are real parasites, Liliana thought. They make up some supernatural value for themselves and then convince others to pay for it. This girl is a true empty-headed person. Honestly, I don't understand men like Salvador. It's clear that you're just being used. Although maybe, like me back then, he dreams of a family and children, so he's willing to pay for his dream, and it never comes true. Dad, Liliana asked her father that evening, is Salvador married? Just judging by the fact that he fell for such an airhead like Carolina, he seems to have very little experience in relationships. Honestly, I don't even know, her father replied. The cook, Augusta, has been working for him for over 10 years, so she says that as long as she remembers him, he's always been busy working. About 5 years ago, Carolina came here for the first time. She lived in his house for about a year, and then she left for the capital. They were planning a wedding at that time, but she canceled it for some reason. Carolina didn't like something back then, so she freaked out and left Salvador. But after a year, she showed up here again. Maybe the owner was chasing after her all this time, who knows? Despite his reserved nature, Liliana had a clear sense that Salvador was a kind person. There was a light emanating from him that he tried to cover up in every possible way. Liliana, he approached her one day. Could you come with me? I need to talk to you. Liliana was very embarrassed, but quickly put down her mop and followed the owner into his office. I know I shouldn't involve you in all this, but I need an outsider's perspective, he began. Lately, I've been, so to speak, punished for disobedience, and they've cut off my oxygen. All that's left of my business is the hotels by the sea, but because of fake charges, my reputation is so tarnished that I can't promote them at all. Competitors, let's call them that, have spread information everywhere that I have bad conditions and that I don't fulfill my obligations to my clients. In short, this season can be considered a failure. What would you do in my place? I understand that you had a business going in an entirely different direction, but still, with your experience, you might have some useful advice. Here, we need to move in two directions, the plan unfolded in Liliana's mind. Firstly, we need to attract sponsors. As far as I understand, you won't be able to handle all of this on your own. What could that be? Let's think. Right now, we can focus on companies that organize various off-site seminars, workshops, conferences, and retreats. They can invest in you, and you can offer them a hotel on very favorable terms, maybe even work for free for some time. Then, we can involve volunteer organizations that work with sick children and adults, also organizing something very beneficial for them. These could be any companies that, for their prestige, will give you temporary patronage and get good advertising for themselves. Don't worry about your reputation. It's like fashion, today it sits badly, and tomorrow everyone is wearing it. This will start the first wave of positive reviews. Secondly, ask people who come to the seaside now to leave reviews. Yes, of course, enemies will send their hyenas, but you won't expose negative reviews for public viewing right now. They are absolutely subjective. Concentrate on the rest for ordinary people, and here, again, there are pluses and minuses, but you could endure it for a few months. Launch promotions. Let VIP rooms be priced at the price of standard rooms for 2 months. People will come, and with them, movement too. The main thing is to launch all this, and then you will need to direct it in the right direction. The scariest thing in any business is to stop. It's better to take 2 steps back and then add 8 forward than to stand in one place. Salvador looked at her attentively. Liliana exuded internal strength. He understood that a woman who reasoned like that would never embark on such an adventure with subpar raw materials. Thank you very much, her owner thanked her. I understand you. Lately, fear has paralyzed me. You're right, I stopped because of all this shock, so I fell into a pit. We need to move, even if it's just 1 step. I'll try to find sponsors now. Maybe someone will agree. The idea with children will be good. It always looks like a surefire option. From that day on, Liliana began to constantly think about how to help her owner. Occasionally, he consulted with her and discussed his affairs. The woman seemed to have found her place again. Her brain was working intensively, and Liliana was happy about it. "I see you've become friends with the owner," her father once said. "You know, Salvador is a good man." "Dad, we're just colleagues," his daughter blushed. "He discusses with me how to get his business out of the crisis. After all, I've been through this several times with my factory." "Ah, Alvaro, come in," the elderly man shook hands with the guest. "How glad I am to see you. So, how are you doing?" "David, very glad to see you," Alvaro smiled broadly. "So, tell me, what happened to you? How can I help you?" "Alvaro, I have a very serious matter to discuss with you," the homeowner looked at him. "I want to get rid of a certain nuisance, and this bug turned out to be quite resilient." "I understand," Alvaro chuckled. "Who is this? Do I know him?" "You definitely don't know him," David replied. "We're talking about Salvador Domingo. I've already taken away his vacation home and 3 hotels, but he didn't want to go down without a fight, so now I want to take everything from him. He still has 7 hotels by the sea, 5 of which are here." "Well, I definitely know Salvador." "You're right," Alvaro laughed. "I think we can try to corner him in 2 ways." "Alvaro, that's exactly what I want you to do," the guest asked the homeowner. "No one else can handle such matters like you. You're like a master jeweler, so to speak." After Alvaro moved to the seaside, he didn't stop at his current position. Marta started dreaming of a villa abroad, and he himself began to dream of a yacht. Liliana's money came to him so easily that he started thinking about how to continue in the same vein. Money started to drive him crazy, to the point where Alvaro became obsessed with it. Within 6 months, he entered the circles of the wealthiest people in the region. One day, Alvaro hinted to a billionaire that he could easily solve his problem. The man gained the trust of another wealthy individual and signed a contract with them, which became simply devastating for the latter. He started being hired for such dirty work and was paid huge sums for it. "Marta, I think we need to leave the country," he told his wife one day. "Sooner or later, they'll catch me. Someone can set me up." "Alvaro, do you really want to leave everything?" His wife objected. "We won't have the same opportunities somewhere in Europe." But Alvaro had good sense. He decided that in a couple of months, they would leave their home for a while and live abroad for a few years. He and Marta were already seriously planning their departure when David called him unexpectedly. And David was a very complicated person. Alvaro couldn't refuse him. He never forgave offenses. "Damn it," Alvaro cursed. "Because of you, Marta, we got stuck here. I don't want to get involved in this." "Oh, come on," his wife laughed. "Salvador is not the same anymore. He's on the verge of bankruptcy. So, you'll deal with him quickly." Alvaro heard that Salvador was looking for a sponsor, so he offered his services. Salvador didn't like all these meetings with the wealthy. He never attended them at all. Therefore, he didn't really know that in their region there was Alvaro Vega, a schemer capable of sniffing out the smallest details and then using them to blackmail his victims. "Hello, Salvador," an unfamiliar voice spoke on the phone. "My name is Alvaro. I would like to discuss sponsorship terms with you. I find your direction very promising and am ready to invest money in it. Could we meet with you and your assistant or with you and your wife to discuss everything in a friendly atmosphere?" Salvador was pacing back and forth in his office. The man was very nervous. He temporarily dismissed the entire office. His main manager was currently away, and it was entirely pointless to ask him to come for a meeting with Carolina. What if, he thought, and rushed out of his office. Salvador burst into the living room, where Liliana was vacuuming the carpet. "Liliana, I need you very much," he said excitedly. "This is about a very important matter. A sponsor called me. I ask you to accompany me to the meeting." "Me?" she exclaimed. "I don't really understand your business," she objected. "I'm begging you, right now, I have no one else but you," he insisted, and Liliana eventually agreed. We'll meet with Alvaro Vega on Thursday, he joyfully announced. Alvaro Vega? She asked, and then paled. Liliana wanted to say something else, but decided to remain silent. Maybe I can find out something about him to use against him later, she thought. She completely changed her hairstyle, dyed her hair, and put on glasses. I don't look like the old Liliana at all, she thought as she looked at herself in the mirror. I don't think he should recognize me. Liliana, her mother exclaimed in shock when she saw her daughter leaving the house. Is that you? She wondered. Dear God, you're unrecognizable. Mom, that's good, she replied quickly. I'll tell you everything later, she told Teresa, and she rushed out of the house. You've changed your appearance so drastically, the host marveled. I can't even recognize you. Salvador, it has to be this way, she quickly replied. I'll explain everything to you later. Salvador and Liliana went to Alvaro's summer house. It was difficult for the woman to hold herself together and not make a scene with Alvaro, but she understood that the future of Salvador and his business could depend on it. She had no doubt that Alvaro was bluffing, but Liliana wanted to find out how he acted. She wanted to understand why he managed to manipulate her so easily. Hello, Alvaro extended his hand. Very pleased to welcome you to my home. Although it's a summer house, it's like a home for us. Alvaro looked closely at Liliana. She had previously asked to be called Eleonora during the visit. Alvaro felt like he had seen her somewhere. Have we met before? He asked her. You seem familiar to me. Unlikely, she replied dryly. I recently returned from abroad. I lived there for several years. Salvador looked at her in amazement but said nothing. They had been discussing the terms that both parties wanted to disclose for about 2 hours. Well, I think everything is settled, Alvaro chuckled. So, here's our contract. You can read it if you need to and sign. We would like to take it with us for a more detailed review, unexpectedly said Liliana. May I take it with me? Why hesitate? Replied Alvaro charmingly. Read it here if you want. Honestly, I don't have time to meet with you again right now. My wife and I are going to be abroad for a long time. Nevertheless, we ask you to wait, the woman persisted. Thank you very much. We'll inform you of our decision in a few days. She abruptly stood up from the table, clutching the contract to her chest. Alvaro gave her an angry look and moved towards Liliana, ready to say something to her, but Salvador intervened. He took his assistant by the arm and quickly led her to the exit. Thank you very much for lunch, he said, formally shaking hands with the host. I'll call you in a day. Liliana and Salvador quickly got into the car. It was evident that the man wanted to ask her something. Liliana, what's going on with you? What's the matter? He angrily shouted at her. We could have signed that damn contract now. Salvador, it's him, she replied through tears. My ex-husband, who took everything from me. This man is not capable of any good deeds. Salvador was in complete shock at the situation. He quickly drove home. They read the contract several times, but found nothing dangerous. Salvador sat moodily, thinking that Alvaro might now refuse to sponsor him. Liliana was finishing her work when a sudden thought struck her like lightning. She quickly ran to the owner and asked to see the contract again. Well, of course, she exclaimed, here it is, we almost made the biggest mistake. Read this. Under special conditions that the sponsored party fails to fulfill, all of its property will be transferred to the sponsor, read Salvador. Well, so what? This is a standard contract, right? If we fail to meet our obligations to them, they will take everything from us. That's not the point, Liliana replied. They were supposed to provide a list of these special circumstances, but it's not there, which means they have this list of special circumstances. For example, if you delay a payment for a day, they can take everything from you. Do you understand? They can claim anything based on what they consider a special circumstance. Now I'm starting to understand, Salvador said in shock. So, special circumstances are determined only by one party, and we have no idea about it at all. It could even be something trivial they could catch on to. Liliana nodded affirmatively. The woman wearily sat on a chair and thought silently for a while. Salvador took a long time to come to his senses. A day later, when Liliana was cleaning the house, the owner arrived for lunch. He quickly found her. "Liliana, I have very good news," he said joyfully. "A children's entertainment company has agreed to sponsor us. The amount they offer is not much, but, as you said, they promised to give us good publicity." "Salvador, I'm so happy for you," she replied, and there was something more in her eyes. "Liliana, you saved me," the owner timidly confessed. "May I invite you somewhere?" "I'm asking you. It's very important to me." "Well, okay," she agreed and added, "can we celebrate this event at your place? Honestly, I don't really want to go to a cafe." "If you agree, I'm all for it," the man rejoiced. "Then, today at 8, I'll call a taxi for you. I'll let Pedro know not to worry about you." "Liliana," the father said to his daughter after work, "I'll honestly tell you, I like Salvador. And I wouldn't mind if something more than friendship developed between you and you had a family." "Dad, what are you talking about?" the woman protested. "It's just a friendly meeting." "Well, yes," Pedro laughed. "I can see how you look at each other as friends." "Okay, go ahead." Salvador was nervous, like a 20-year-old on a first date. He kept getting up from his chair to serve Liliana more salad or refill her wine glass. "You know, Salvador, I've dreamed of the sea all my life, but I never seriously thought about moving," the guest said with a smile. "I had to lose everything for the sea to become a part of my life." "Why the sea?" he asked her with interest. "Do you love swimming so much?" "No, but I've loved the sea since childhood," the woman replied. "When I was 16, I started dreaming that my beloved would sail to me on a ship. He would overcome so many obstacles for me, pass all the trials just to embrace me. Of course, I wouldn't want to just sit on the shore, but the man of my dreams somehow had to come to me from the sea." "I love the sea too," Salvador smiled. "Thanks to the fact that my father wasn't a poor man, I spent a lot of time by the sea. I also dreamed that someday I would have my own ship, and I would sail on it." "Then, to the sea." Liliana raised her glass. "May it be eternal. For the sea and the love for it." The woman put down her glass, and her eyes met Salvador's. He got up from his chair and approached her. He gently embraced the woman and kissed her. Liliana felt such warmth inside that she was afraid to even move. "Salvador," she said in the morning, "I never thought I'd say this again someday, but I love you." "Liliana, on the contrary, I feel like I fell in love for the first time in my life," the man replied. The woman seemed to flutter for several days, but then her happiness was quickly shattered. 2 days later, Carolina came to Salvador. Liliana, as if coming to her senses, felt ashamed. "Dad, I'm such a fool," she scolded herself. "I completely forgot that he has a fiancée, you could even say a wife. What have I done? I didn't even notice how I fell in love with him." "It's not for you to decide, Liliana, who he should be with," her father said sternly. "That model has been in his life for 5 years, and it's all useless. So let him make the decision himself." But Liliana couldn't watch all this the way her father did. To make matters worse, Carolina didn't leave, she created constant problems. A month passed, and Salvador still couldn't have a normal conversation with Liliana. "Carolina, leave," the homeowner said to the girl. "It's over. I don't love you. Do you understand?" he shouted. "Salvador, why are you so upset?" She tried to hug him. "Now that your business is thriving again, we could think about the wedding." "Don't touch me," the man recoiled from her. "Make sure you're not in my house by tomorrow." The girl seized the moment, jumped on him, and passionately began to kiss him. At that moment, Liliana, who wanted to tell him the news, was about to enter. She opened the door and saw the homeowner kissing his fiancée. She quickly closed the door and ran out of the house. "Oh God, how naive I am," the woman scolded herself. "I came to tell him such news, and he's kissing someone else. Well, Salvador, I won't block your way." Finally, the next day, Carolina left. The girl realized that there was nothing left for her here, so she decided to focus on her second fiancé. How did she leave? Salvador paled. "But why didn't Liliana tell me anything? Pedro, where is she?" He begged the father to tell him about Liliana. "Salvador, forgive me, but I can't tell you about it," he said, lowering his head. "I promised my daughter." In the first few months, Salvador walked around darker than a cloud. Despite his business thriving more and more, he missed Liliana deeply. There was some invisible force that bound them together. The man felt it distinctly. Pedro continued to work for him, but he no longer bothered him. Perhaps Liliana herself would want to meet with me someday, and then she would convey it through her father. "I have nothing else to do but wait," Salvador decided. Meanwhile, Liliana collected all the money she had and went to a village. Neither her mother nor her father knew where their daughter had gone. They often talked on the phone and transferred money to her card. This saved Liliana then because it was difficult for her to work. Late pregnancy had caused severe toxemia. The woman just lay for the first 4 months. But the fresh air in the village quickly revived her, and the second half of the pregnancy went easier. Liliana even thought about returning home, but was afraid that if she found out about Carolina and Salvador's wedding, she simply wouldn't be able to endure it. "Liliana," her father called her one day, "there are rumors that it's over for Alvaro. He displeased some guy, and that guy spilled everything to the police. After Alvaro failed for David, he got really mad. For 2 weeks, he didn't know what to do, but eventually, his anger got the better of him, and he reported him to the police. David reported that behind his back, Alvaro tried to slip a contract that could harm Salvador. 2 more people, whom Alvaro had cheated on for clients, joined the case. They apprehended him at the airport when he was about to leave the country with his family, thinking he could fly away forever. Despite being alone, Liliana, with her pregnancy, managed well. She rented a decent house for 9 months. Her parents sent her enough money during this time. It was mid-May when Liliana gave birth to a daughter. "My beloved girl," the woman rejoiced, "you are the most beautiful to me." After the birth of the child, Liliana realized that there was no more reason to hide. However Salvador's fate turned out, by this time, she could accept everything, especially since Liliana had immense gratitude towards him for giving her a child. "Liliana," her mother exclaimed in shock when her daughter entered the house. "Liliana, you had a baby? Why didn't you tell us anything?" "Mom, I love Salvador so much that I was afraid if I found out he was married, I wouldn't be able to handle it, and I would have a miscarriage due to stress," she said through tears. "Liliana, there was no wedding with him at all," her mother kissed her. "If you had let us tell you about this, you would have been happy together a long time ago. Salvador loves only you," he told Pedro. "I will wait for her." "Mom, I was so afraid of losing him," tears streamed down Liliana's cheeks. "Alvaro poisoned my life so much that I started treating all men with distrust." Teresa played with her granddaughter when her husband returned home. The man was stunned by the surprise. "Dad, what's wrong with you?" Liliana picked up. "Daddy, are you okay?" "My love, forgive me." "Give me a sedative," he barely pronounced, "or I might get a heart attack." Liliana quickly brought her father to his senses, and he couldn't be happier about his granddaughter. "So, what did you name our little girl?" Grandpa admired the baby. "Probably some unusual name?" Paulina, the daughter, replied. "That's what Salvador's mother was called. He loved her very much." "Dad, Mom, tomorrow I want to take a walk with my daughter to the coast. It's already warm outside." Pedro didn't have to go to work the next day, but he had been away from home since early in the morning. "Mom, where did Dad go?" Liliana asked in surprise. "I thought maybe you would take a walk with us." "Liliana, he went to the market," her mother smiled. Today, go for a walk yourself, and in a few days, we'll come with you. Pedro deliberately took a taxi to catch Salvador at home. The car had already approached his yard when the owner of the house started driving out of the gate. Pedro, good morning, Salvador said, surprised. Aren't you off today? Salvador, let's go inside for a couple of minutes. The gardener took him by the arm. Son, there's something I need to tell you. Did Liliana come back? He asked eagerly. Pedro, did your daughter come home? Salvador, here's the thing, the man chose his words carefully, Liliana didn't come back alone. Pedro, you have a daughter, Paulina. For a long time, Salvador couldn't understand the meaning of these words. Then he covered his face with his hands and cried loudly. Oh God, how silly she is, he finally said. I love her. Why did she do this to me? Salvador, Liliana did it unintentionally, the gardener embraced him. She was afraid that if she found out about your wedding with Carolina, she wouldn't be able to handle it. Son, she loves you too. Is she at home now? Salvador asked. I will go to her, I won't wait any longer. Salvador, she went to the sea with the baby, Pedro replied. Salvador quickly jumped into his car and drove off somewhere. The gardener sat on a chair and sat in silence for a long time. Despite the overwhelming fatigue, he was very happy. So, we finally waited, he said aloud. We're going to be happy too. Liliana walked along the deserted shore with her daughter, wondering how long she had been waiting for this moment. There, in the village, the woman missed the sea very much. She kept stopping and looking into the distance. The girl was peacefully sleeping, the sea air calmed her. The sea was calm. Liliana took a book from her bag and started reading. Suddenly, her gaze fell on the sea, and a gray dot appeared from afar. It was rapidly approaching. Liliana dropped the little prince from her hands and jumped to her feet. The girl slept peacefully in her portable crib. The woman approached the edge of the water. She could clearly see a yacht sailing towards the shore. Liliana, Salvador shouted and waved his hands. Liliana, I love you. Salvador, Liliana screamed and ran to the water's edge. She quickly took off her shoes and stepped into the water. Salvador, we're here, she waved with one hand, and her other hand, out of excitement, loosened, and her dress dipped into the water. The yacht was about 20 meters away from her. Liliana clearly saw Salvador's radiant face. I love you, Liliana, he shouted and joyfully laughed. Will you marry me? Yes, Liliana shouted. Salvador, you have a daughter, and she looks a lot like you.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe.